Many teams use OKRs and then they think they are outcome focused.
Outcomes over output, but maybe not at all costs.
Which are the capabilities I need so I can move towards that?
The way the goals are set up don't match the capabilities of the team.
Velocity is the measure of success.
Great velocity, but feature adoption is, 2% active users, then you probably didn't do a great job.
I always look at that and say, if we're just doing the same as your competitors, then you compete on price.
AI allows you to get to the hard part faster. It's not like letting the AI do the thing for you. It's like the setting you up to do the thing better.
What's the one question they should ask? Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Untapping Product Teams for 2026. And to kick off, we have today Tim Herbig, who is a keynote speaker, product coach, and now the author of this book here, Real Progress. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thank you so much, David.
All right. So how does it feel for you to be a book author now? I think you created a lot of content for years and you got the book out, if I'm not mistaken, September last year.
Yeah. I mean, by now it feels more real, but it's like, I would say it felt really real when I spoke at a meetup in late November. And that basically was the first time that I had an in-person appearance since the book launched. And so it was the first time people who bought the book brought it with them. So it's the first time I saw used copies in the wild with markers and Post-its and really seeing used copies. And I think that was probably the first time where I appreciated this does something for people. Like Amazon reviews is nice and feedback, but seeing how people use it. So it feels more real than it did before. I will say that. I mean, the feeling. It's like it feels good to click publish, but for me, it felt like only when I saw the real copies in real life, I feel like, okay, it's there. It's doing something.
Nice.
Yeah.
And one thing, you have been creating content for years now, like blog post, newsletter that you keep religiously, and video content that got thousands of views. And what happened that you decided to write a book, which is considerable work?
It is. That's a good question. For me, I have the privilege that I enjoy writing. It feels it's my favorite way to express myself. I like to joke. And I feel like at some point after going independent, I felt like writing a book feels like part of the game in a way. But I had a couple of years where I thought no, I'm going to write a book. No, I'm going to write a book, but I never did. And it dawned on me that there is this feeling of needing to have the book inside of you. It's like, it's there. It wants to come out in a way. I feel like that's what I needed to really to persevere through this journey of writing the book. And so in 2023, I really felt like that. Okay, now I really have something in me. And then the running joke for me is I once was on a cab, I think at Project Heart with Petra Wille and Jeff Gotthelf and I think Christina Watke, and they started talking about all the book releases they're doing. Sitting there, I was like, I want to write a book too. And so, jokes aside, a few weeks after that, I got started. And as you know, the painful and non-linear journey of writing a book. It felt, and I liked the challenge. I felt like people talk a lot about how hard it is to write a book. And a part of me was curious, how hard is it? Does it really feel? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And in terms of writing, there's always something like, what do you want to solve for the reader?
Right.
So what did you choose to solve? The book is called Real Progress.
Yeah.
But tell me more about it.
I think the key thing I arrived, and it took me a while, and I'm sure you can relate, but it took me a while to really get what's the core? That's the red thread, essentially. And the thing I landed on was this idea of pointing out to people how much is already there when they're stuck with something. How much is already there when you're struggling with your strategy or your discovery or setting goals. There's so much there. And oftentimes people try to do strategy harder or write OKRs more. It's there's something there. Look at the other things, artifacts you have around you, and probably they can help you. And I wanted to point out this connection, like that you don't necessarily always have to go deeper into a practice, but you can look sideways and think about, oh yeah, this, like this OKR set gives me a lot of orientation for my discovery, or this strategy gives me a lot of orientation for setting goals. And I felt like many teams were almost blind to that because they were so focused on what's the next framework, what's the next tactic, what's the next thing, or this or that. I was like, there's so much there. Just like, can't we reuse the other stuff? And that was the core thing that I had in mind of saying, okay, there's so much there. And even when we talk about new tactics, which I try to do with tactics, like make sure that these tactics, that you are clear about the purpose these tactics have to serve for you. I think these are the two core things I wanted to point out: the connection and choosing tactics based on a value they should create for you.
Mm-hmm. I like this part of choosing and the purpose, because there's way more frameworks out there than you can use.
Yeah.
First, it will be very hard for you to learn everything, and it's not really necessary, but you need to know what is the purpose, what you're trying to solve. So if you give some guidance, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one thing that I think when people mistake, when they are asked to create a strategy, the question is not really what's needed is not the strategy. What's needed is the clarity to make a decision or to measure progress, whatever it is. And I think once you understand that, you can shift from, oh, let me choose a template, to which activities are actually needed here to achieve the goal.
And on this note, the book is here and it's called Real Progress. So what is your definition of real progress?
To me, it's the combination of making sure, the one simple version is to say you solve problems for an audience that matters, that is aligned with the company strategy goal, and you make these choices based on evidence. That's very, very simplified. And of course you could say, well, that's the fundamental of product management. And I would agree. And I think the thing I would add to that as a layer is, okay, but the way you do that, the way you get there is what I mentioned before, is this value-based choosing of how you get there, how you do that, right? Because you can tick the boxes of talking to customers every week, fill the strategy template, et cetera, and you could feel like you're doing these things, but I don't think sometimes you might miss the mark, because then you're confusing the hammer and the nail. And I think it's doing these three things in a way that is really based on what you want to achieve, and in a pragmatic way, frankly. So it's more about I would say, the value it provides, not the academic correctness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So knowing what to achieve and then using the techniques for that. Yeah. And sometimes teams may start with the technique without knowing what to achieve. Then
many do.
You tick the boxes. Yes,
I did in the past. So I think no one's free of that, right?
Yeah, I did that several times. And one thing, on the techniques, for example, you talked a lot about OKRs, and many teams use OKRs and then they think they are outcome focused. I think that also. And at some point I was not really outcome focused. And I have seen many other teams doing similarly to that. And what have you seen?
I think the main thing I've seen in the context of OKRs is that there is almost this trade-off companies want to make by saying, oh, we're going to get outcome focused. And then they write outcome goals in the OKRs. So they set outcome OKRs, but then they might not be useful for the team. And then you're wondering what is going on. We're doing outcomes, we're doing OKRs, we should be in product management fairy tale land. And I think the reason that I oftentimes meet is that the way the goals are set up don't match the capabilities of the team. Right? It doesn't match up. So you give a team an outcome goal, but maybe the team doesn't even have the capabilities to measure that goal. Okay, you have a great outcome metric, but you can't measure it. So is that better? I would say it's not. Or you give a team a goal, or a team sets itself a goal that is technically an outcome, but is out of reach. It's not connected to what they can actually influence with their work. So then they start to track a goal that is disconnected from their work, which I would argue is also not valuable. So I think that's the risk that I have, and what I landed on. And I love this quote from George Seiden, who said outcomes over output, right? And in principle, I agree. The thing I add to most teams that I get to meet is outcomes over output, but maybe not at all cost, as in not be too dogmatic, right? Because this leads you to these goals that look good on paper, but don't help the team do anything.
Yeah, and also there's one thing, it's outcome over outputs, not instead of, because you
Yeah,
need both. So
yeah,
you
that's true.
do need. And you mentioned the capabilities, and I think
Mm.
this is a question many of people listening or watching to us
Mhm.
now are thinking like, all right, I have been struggling to get outcome focused.
Mhm.
Which are the capabilities I need so I can move towards that?
That's such a good question. I think that the painful part of trying to, I mean, I think many frameworks can do that, but let's just stick with OKRs, is that
Mm-hmm.
the problem is that OKRs they don't solve your problems per se. Probably they make even, I think they make the goals more visible, more painful.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to make a decision as a company how you want to deal with that. And there's this great, there's almost like a spider diagram from two authors on OKRs, Natalia Helso and Sonia Mewes, where they say it's like the OKRs might sit at the center, but on the outside, you have things like your company's compensation model, how your teams are structured, what tools are available, your delivery cadence, your customer types. Like there's so many things around it that really define how much you're able to set OKRs in a more outcome oriented way. And when you then realize, shit, I would have to fix all these 8 things, then the company might be like, let's maybe not do that. Right? It's like, that's a bit much. Let's just keep the pretty OKRs or do output OKRs or whatever. And I think that's a shame because that's where the potential is. But of course, the company has to be ready for it, as in, okay, we might question whether we want to have performance-based compensation for team members if that interferes with OKRs. That's a big conversation to have. So I get it that you might not always be ready for it, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. If you're not ready for it, is it worth doing at all, or how do you make it happen? So, if what would be the start point for you?
The starting point for me would be, and I would say add one thing. I think there's sometimes in product management world, there can be this idea of here's the perfect world. And if you're not doing it this way, you're not a real product team. Right? There's this notion that sometimes floats around. It's like, that's the right way. And I'm wondering, okay, look, this is probably, I don't know, 0.05% of teams operate this way. Like, what about all the other companies? Like, don't they deserve to improve their practice as well? I think they do, because they're all humans. So the thing that I often do when I work with a company who wants to improve their product practices per se is I try and invite them to treat product management like a product. So to say, look, so tell me, let's say a year from now, what has changed? Like, how do the product teams operate differently? Like, how would you know? Like, what change do you want to see? And it's like, it's embarrassingly simple, right? Because that's what we're doing with our products. We describe changes in behaviors for customers. But many companies struggle with doing that for the teams, for the people they have on the payroll. And that's what I often like to start with, because once you have this vision statement, kind of whatever you want to call it, once you have that in place, you can then say, okay, here's what we're trying to do to get there. And then you have something to measure or hold against to see if you're on track.
It's very interesting treating product management with product managers. That's
Yeah.
yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And there's this thing like, yeah, we have a lot of trouble here. So, like, you see a lot of LinkedIn posts there, a lot
Yeah.
of stories, but that tells you maybe 0.00001% of the
Yeah.
reality. But the thing is, the ultimate goal is to create value for customers and collect value for business. So
Exactly.
if you're reaching that, good. Maybe there's
Exactly.
something that helps you reach that faster or more,
Yeah.
but it's means to
Yeah.
ends.
Agreed. And I think like there's one quote which I really love from John Cutler. I think he said that every framework should have, these like washing instructions that you have on your clothing. And he said like frameworks should have that too. Frameworks should have these instructions of, this is a snapshot of what has worked for one company in a specific context and a specific point in time. Like that's what this is. It's nothing more. And use it accordingly, but don't treat it as this is the way, And I think that's easy to get lost because that doesn't get you many LinkedIn likes and clicks.
Yeah, if you share these things, they don't get many likes, so people won't see that. Yeah. But it's the hard things that we need to do. And talking about hard things, some people listening, they will say, all right, I'm a PM. My head of product, VP, CPO, whoever it is, loves velocity and story points. What should I do then?
Yeah, I would say, per se, like many things, I wouldn't say per se velocity is bad, right? I think it's how you're using it. I think if you're what you're probably alluding to, if you're confusing it to a measure of customer value, then I think you have the problem. But I mean, as you said, like in the end, it's about customer problems, business value, and ultimately this only happens when you ship something, right? It's like no strategy document per se creates customer value. And I think velocity I think it's a vital thing for a team to get a grip on, to make sure that once they have identified something that quote unquote works or is relatively certain to work, that you actually deliver that. You need those capabilities, this muscle, right? But just the velocity, like there's like great velocity, but feature adoption is, I don't know, 2% of monthly active users, then you probably didn't do a great job. So I think it's like many metrics. It's saying like, what does this metric tell us? Like this velocity, a decrease in velocity tells us that the team has struggles to consistently ship stuff. That's probably what it tells you. Mm-hmm. Maybe the business is doing great. Maybe customer satisfaction is through the roof. But yeah, that's what it tells you.
I like when you said using and confusing. So indeed, the velocity is not bad. It's bad when you confuse it and you think that velocity shows you progress. It just shows you can deliver something at certain speed. But then what do you do next? That's a big question. This episode is brought to you by Product Board, the intelligent product management platform. For over 10 years, Product Board has helped leading organizations like Zoom, Salesforce, and Autodesk build the right products faster. Its end-to-end platform is purpose-built for helping product teams uncover customer needs, define their strategy, and align everyone around the roadmap. And now it's equipping product organizations to excel in the AI era with Product Board Spark, its new specialized agent for product management. Explore new product ideas or generate a product brief in seconds with AI that already understands your product and your business. See how Product Board can help your product teams ship faster and deliver high-impact products. Head to productboard.com/spark. And teams when they look at this, they may wonder, okay, but my manager says that velocity is the measure of success. And we all know that's not the case, but they may wonder, what does success actually look like?
Mm-hmm. And I think the interesting question here is, again, you might even say, look, for this new team or this new department, maybe the main measure is, can we get them, quote unquote, productively set up? And maybe we mostly focus on velocity. As like for 1 quarter, we want to see this team's velocity improve. We want to see that they are able to get together and execute things, right? It's like, and then you can make it a health metric that you only reactively look at. It's like, okay, we keep an eye on velocity, but it's not the main driver. But maybe you say, okay, at the beginning, it's like this, when the teams go through this, and I probably get the order wrong. It's like, what is it? Forming, norming, storming. Yeah, I always mix it up.
Storming, norming, and then performing.
We know, the listeners know what we're talking about, right? In this phase, you might like, hey, we want to, of course, the team ultimately should be able to deliver something at a somehow predictable cadence. But yeah, it shouldn't become the long-term measure of customer value.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important aspect that's often ignored. Like, what is your team's stage? Because sometimes you're talking about outcomes, and you hear that from teams that are working together for years. So they know how the others think, how they tick, they have tools, they have everything in place. So it's very easy to talk about outcome oriented.
Yeah.
And some other teams live in the other spectrum. Mm-hmm. They're just new. People just got hired. So what is the one thing they can improve? Because for sure, you can't improve everything at once.
Yeah. I would say that's what I like to do. Is like when you look at certain, and you said it perfectly. You said like, look, ultimately it all comes down to solving customer problems, increasing business value. And I think if you take something simple as discovery, as an activity, as a broad range of activities, right? What's the point? Like the point is to reduce uncertainty, reduce risk. And I think the interesting invitation to that is that every team, whether they are B2B, B2C, whether they're building internal products, external products, or how mature they are, there's probably, if you look at the work you're currently doing, there is some kind of risk in the work that you're doing. And the invitation could be, can you reduce this risk before you write the first line of code? And I even tell to teams, like, look, even if you're working in a very hippo-driven company, and even if the CEO constantly drops features by your desk, you might not have the power to change his or her behavior. But I'm sure you can find and reduce uncertainties in this top-down feature idea. And you can engage in that and then point it out and maybe say, hey, I think there's a risk here. We can reduce it or whatever. We can test it before. And I think that's this discrepancy between confusing the framework, the process, the steps with what it's actually about. If you think discovery is talking to 10 people every week and nothing else, then yeah, you might think, okay, I can't do discovery with this feature idea of the CEO. If you think discovery is everything that reduces uncertainty, there's probably stuff you can do.
That's the question many people struggle with. Like, how do I reduce risk and uncertainty? And I wonder if you have some examples on how teams successfully did that.
Yeah, one thing I can share, which was a very interesting discovery we ran many years ago when I worked at Zing, which is Germany's LinkedIn for those who might not know anymore. Like, one thing that was interesting is we thought about a new type of content we wanted to serve to a certain audience. And what we did was we basically we collected this data manually from customers, and we populated an email template with that, and we sent it out to those customers as an ABC test to see which would get the highest click and open rates, because we could compare that to other emails, which was good because then we saw, okay, this is interesting content at least. But the problem was we missed the mark on what actually mattered. And because then our boss's boss pointed out, look, it's great that people are interested, but I want to see if we can monetize that. So you're not proving something here. Like, you could make a correlation between interestingness and willingness to pay, but it's not strong. So we ran another test where we put some of the information away and told people you have to upgrade, you have to purchase to see this information. And you couldn't purchase, but we looked at the clicks again, and we could then compare how the clicks perform to real content and upgrade numbers. And so that was an interesting reminder for me that you don't have to build the actual product. You can fake it in a different format. You can send an email when you want to test it in an app, when you build it in an app. And you always need to be sure, like, what is really the critical question we're trying to answer? What is it really? And for example, not confusing general like people liking something with an actual willingness to pay if that's what you're after.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good example. And when you say you can fake it, Ash Maurya wrote that in his book, Running Lean. Fake it until you can make it.
Yeah.
So I like this very much because the objective in the end is to de-risk the idea. So you accelerate the learning without building. So many teams, especially now, which will be the next thing I will talk, think like, well, we can just build and see how it is.
Yeah.
Because there is this thing now called AI that teams can just go and start building things and so on. But that's what changed a little bit the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's now either using AI or adding. But let's talk about the first part, using AI. So how do you see AI changing how teams achieve real progress?
I think so much possibility, at least, right? I think few companies have actually found the sustainable answer, but I think that's the nature of the technology that is still so rapidly changing. Like, a few observations that I have, like, one is that the question of who has which role on a team changes and is more blurry, right? Like, who can do what, like, suddenly it's very much expanded. So I think that's the first thing, to figure out what is really the remaining unfair advantage of a product manager versus a designer versus an engineer, to use a typical trio. And it's like to be figured out. The second thing that I see is, okay, there might be, coming back to velocity, there might be an increase in things you're able to throw out there, whether you ship it or you test it. But the question is, do you also have the capabilities to maintain this kind of stuff? Because more features means more support requests, more technical debt, more UX questions, etc. Doesn't have to be wrong, but that's what will happen. And so the question is, can you maintain it? Or is your product then very quickly full of features you quickly produce, but this is still, the core value is still there? The third observation, which I think might be the most interesting for now, is that I know that as an anecdote from someone else, is like, you suddenly have designers who are have potentially can churn out prototypes 20 times more quickly. So the question now becomes, do you want the designer to produce 20 times more prototypes, or do you want them to spend the free time that they now have on the harder questions? And I think this is a very interesting distinction. Like, what do we do with the free time coming from AI productivity? And I like this quote from Ravi Mehta, who also heavily contributed to the book. And he said something along the lines of, AI allows you to get to the hard part faster. I think this is really, really on point of like, okay, use it to take the shortcuts that are limiting yourself and then face the hard questions that are still in front of you. And I really like this way of thinking of how and when to utilize AI.
That's a very strong way of looking at it, especially the part where the roles start getting blurred. Because there was a joke before, like, PMs don't code, don't design, so what do? So yeah, it still doesn't change, but now, what do? So good question. But now PMs can create something and test, designers also, everyone, and even soft engineers can get more access to data and come up with hypotheses and so on. But one thing doesn't change, at least for me, the fact that the great product is not the one you have nothing to add, is the one you have nothing to remove. So what happens, like when you add loads of features, you mentioned, your value proposition there might be actually so hidden that customers don't understand what the product is for anymore.
Right.
And that goes to the hard questions.
Yeah.
So what do you keep in the product? What do you remove?
And I think it's so tempting, right, to just say we, as a product, we might expand what we can do through AI functionality. We add new features. Or do you think about what is the core why people do actually use us, and we make that faster or easier? And I think there's no right answer per se, right? Because everyone is still figuring it out, right? So it's like, who knows, right? I think there are great examples. I think a tool that I really like how they approach AI personally is Notion. As in, I think that for me, they strike a pretty good balance of using AI to do what you're doing, like the note-taking organization, do it faster, and integrating that very neatly into the product. But you can still do the core stuff in the product very nicely. But my favorite feature is, for example, that you have an integrated meeting note-taking transcription feature in the Notion app. So when I have a note, a task, an item, for a call and everyone consents, I can transcribe it right into Notion. It gives me a summary and everything. And I've just I saved 2 tools, right? And I don't have to do it manually. So the existing workflow is sped up in the tool, so less friction. So yeah, that's one of my favorite examples for now.
This one connects a lot to what Katie Sierra said at some point. I think she said, don't build better cameras, build better photographers. And it's about don't upgrade your product, upgrade your user. And I also like Notion. I used to like Grammarly a lot. I used to say that Grammarly made me a better writer, but recently with the updates, I stopped using. So because it started changing my voice. So that's why I don't use it anymore. So that's when it backfires.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think just as a sidetrack, I think it's like Grammarly has this interesting position because now they've acquired Coda and Superhuman. So they're this like productivity conglomerate. So it's all a bit like, what is this? Right? But that's another discussion.
What is this? So it's like as a writer, I didn't identify myself anymore with Grammarly. So I mean, I have this. I'm not sure if I probably should fact check that, but I saw. I think the CEO of Anthropic, I think he said in an interview recently with one of the Stripe founders, he said like he uses Claude a lot for sparring and thinking, but he still does the writing himself. Something like that. Again, happy to be fact checked on that, but I think that's what I saw. And that is just interesting. It's like, it tells you like, okay, it's not like letting the AI do the thing for you. It's like the setting you up to do the thing better. That's a good analogy, I think. And that's another part. Like, AI can make you faster in some aspects. I do believe you can run experiments way faster than you ran in the past. But in other aspects, I see AI making you better. when it comes to writing, I stop with Grammarly and I use Claude actually.
Mm.
But what I do all the writing on by my own. So
Yeah.
I do everything there in a Google Sheet, and then I use Claude to criticize. And I
Right.
created a project that connects to my book to keep
Yeah.
my voice, my best
Exactly.
post newsletter. And then whatever I write, Claude will check for value for the reader, authenticity, flow, and engagement. And within that, I can improve. But it takes me way longer to write.
Yeah.
But it's fine. The content is
It's
better
fine.
in the end.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Especially in like just LinkedIn, right? It's like you can produce more LinkedIn posts, but they all read the same now. So what's the point?
And in the other spectrum, like AI features, many executives receive pressure from the board, from the investors, like we need to add AI features.
Yeah.
And then the PM receives like a roadmap with AI features, but they don't understand why. So how do they handle that?
It's such a good idea. I tell you when I have the answer. I can tell you. I can tell you one example that I observed from a company, which is that like the company, like the C-level, was very heavy on AI, like leverage AI, use AI, and they were using OKRs, but they didn't want to add AI to the OKRs. And so we constantly had this dual universe priority listing of, these are the OKRs and everything, but remember also AI. And I tried to get them. I failed to do so, but I tried to get them like, tell me what you mean with AI. Explain it to me in plain English, and then we can try to put it into something measurable people can connect to. They couldn't, right? And I think that's again goes back to this question: like, can you tell me what you want to achieve? And like, I try to encourage people to not get started thinking in objectives or key results. Just say it in plain English, like. We want you to use AI so that either internal efficiency or customer, whatever it is. But you have to name that thing, I believe, for the teams to actually work on that. Because otherwise you're like, okay, let's put an AI generator in this text input.
Yeah. Again, it's like, what do you want to achieve?
Yeah.
Then you can work backwards.
Yeah.
Like for example, I was thinking also about AI and so on, talking about strategy. There's no right way of doing strategy. Strategy that works will simplify decision making. So if you can say yes or no to something, your strategy is good. If you can't, then it means you need to go back to the strategy.
Right.
And I was trying to create an AI product that would criticize your strategy and give you hints on what you could do better. But the objective was to give perspectives on where you could strengthen your strategy. I haven't finished that, but I started with, how do I help people improve their strategy if I'm not in the room? Is it possible?
I think it is, right? Because as you pointed out, if you can put the AI towards what you can improve, right? And you have this, for example, things like the competitor research or research parts of a strategy, which should you need it, this could be easily sped up. Or I think one of those famous Michael Porter quotes, right? Isn't it like, you don't have to be right, you just have to be different or something like that? And this checking for, do your competitors do the same thing as you do? This could be an easy, quote unquote, strategy sparing. It's like, look, if you do the same as your competitors, chances are this strategy won't really help you. I think there's so many, there are lots of angles there to explore.
Yeah, I always look at that and say, like, if we're just doing the same as your competitors, then you compete on price.
Yeah.
Which can be a game if you want, but is it the game you want to play? You still need to answer that.
Yeah.
And now, talking about progress, there is a lot of advice. People love getting advice from different places. And I imagine there's some progress about some advice on progress, how you can accelerate that you may think it doesn't work. Could you share something?
Doesn't work. I think it's one thing would be to follow the shiny object syndrome of other ways of working, like the new hot shit. Like, it's this way, or it's this. I don't want to throw anything under the bus, right? You might say it's a product operating model, or it's a Spotify model, whatever it is, right? I think it's easy to get carried away by that. And again, not knowing why you want to do it in the first place, not knowing how you would know you've succeeded. I think that's one observation I have. The other one would be, again, not trying to change the entire org all at once, but to think about, okay, how can, again, treating it like a product, like where could I have the MVP, the pilot, and see what works, what doesn't, and then roll it out from there. I think these are the two biggest observations that I have. And maybe the third one would be what we touched on before when we talked about OKRs, to say, be aware of those surrounding factors that really influence your capabilities to deliver or change the way teams work.
Mm-hmm. Many teams do have this syndrome, like the neighbor's grass is always greener. So you look at what you don't have and then you start complaining. But there are things that work with you, regardless where you are. And some things don't. So
Agreed.
Change gradually. I like what you mentioned. Don't try changing the whole org at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the elements and then pick one at a time. That's a good direction to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And now, tomorrow is someone's sprint planning. Someone's going to decide what to do next. What's the one question they should ask?
One question they should ask is, out of all of these potential backlog items we could pull into the next sprint, which ones will help us the most to make progress on this one goal we have this quarter? That's what I'm trying to, and there's so much in there, right? This could mean, what do you mean goal? Or I don't know. There's so much in there, but I think if you boil it down, look, you're setting these goals for a purpose. And if you can't link the work, the actions you're taking to these goals, then one of these is not the right one for you.
And you know why I like this? It's because I used to do the opposite.
Yeah.
So I just followed the flow and so on, and I got trapped because I used to start the sprint planning with the question, what is our capacity for this sprint?
Yeah.
And then we would start planning by capacity.
Right.
But the moment I tweak to a variation of your question, saying like, what do we want to achieve? And then from there, picking the items from the backlog. Funny thing that happened is that I would ask the team another question after, like, how confident are we to deliver this? And then sometimes the team members would say 50%. I say, tell me more. And I say, oh, well, because there is an excess of activities here on where we fall short. So for example, back-end or front-end. If we adapt this, we can deliver. It's way better than saying like our capacity is 37 story points and this sums up to 39. We can't do it. So I got to better conversations with the team when we started with a goal, pick the items and ask, how confident are we to achieve it?
Right.
It's a very different conversation. And now, getting to the end of our conversation, is there anything else you want to leave to those listening or watching to us?
I think the main thing I would say to people is do what is needed, not what is expected. As in, embrace the pragmatism required. As you mentioned before, like if you, whatever scrappy, non-by-the-book way makes your customers happy and increases the business value, who's there to say that's not the right way?
Yes, do what's needed, not what's expected. I love that. It's hard to do this,
100%.
but it is very hard.
Yeah.
But I tell you what happens. The more you do that, the more visibility you get, and visibility helps you grow in your influence and then your career.
Agreed.
Yeah, great.
Nice.
And Tim, how should people reach out to you?
I think the easiest way is probably through LinkedIn. If you can make it through all the hoops and distractions on LinkedIn, just search for my name, reach out there, or through my website, which is herbig.co, where all the information are lined up of how to get in touch and how to learn more.
Thank you for all the insights. It was really helpful. You shared so many things that are actionable. I hope everyone listening, you pick one or two things, just try it out and drop me a message how that worked out for you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Untapping Product Teams. Subscribe to get more insights like this. We have a powerful upcoming lineup. Alexander Stilwalder, John Cutler, Matt LeMay, and many more. Let's keep untrapping product teams together.